Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Yesha if you're new here, and I've been asking kind of on various social media platforms about what you want to know about family planning and being pregnant and maternity leave and all of those things during residency, and I got a lot of the same questions, so I'm going to address them in this video and also give you a little bit of my advice about the best ways to approach the entire thing. So if this is something that will pertain to you or that does pertain to you, please keep watching. So really, one of the main questions I kept getting over and over was how much maternity leave do you get? Do you get full maternity leave? Is it always the same? How do you take advantage of it, etc.? So I think that this is kind of a multifaceted question, and I want to address it in as many ways and as thoroughly as possible. The first thing to know is there is no one governing body that can decide that this is how much maternity leave everyone is going to get. Or I should say family leave. It's not really just maternity leave, but family leave. This is how much everyone is going to get. There are some programs where you're going to get very little, and there's some programs where paternity leave will be X number of weeks and maternity leave is more weeks. There's some programs where both maternity and paternity and any kind of family leave is really long. And there are some places where they will make you extend training. There are some places that don't. I think the best thing to do is to talk to the resources that you have. So number one, HR. HR is really helpful, and they're usually really approachable and really nice about these things. If you're friends with your program coordinator, if you're close with them and you are willing to share, your news or share that this is something you're thinking about, your program coordinator often has a lot of resources about the leave that prior residents have taken if you maybe don't want to ask your other residents. They also usually have a really good relationship with HR and can kind of point you in the right direction about who to talk to. And on top of that, obviously your program director, I don't know if you want to disclose it to your program director, but if you do, your program director obviously will know, and you might even have a policy in your handbook, in your residency handbook, about how much leave residents normally get and how much they normally take. And if you notice those are two separate things, right? Like how much do you get and how much does everyone take? They're not always the same thing. Because, as I mentioned in a previous video, the culture surrounding leave is just as important as the actual amount of time of leave that you get. So you want to know that you get 12 weeks and that people take 12 weeks before you can, make your final decision or figure out exactly how much leave you're going to get. So know your resources. HR for sure, your program being the residency handbook, which is the first place I would start, your program coordinator, and your program director will all have information about these things. And of course, any other co-residents that have recently had a baby or have recently gone through the same thing, they may also know kind of where to go for these resources. And even some faculty members may be able to help you. If you have faculty members that utilize any of these policies or anything like that, sometimes it's a different policy depending on if they are employed by the same institution or if they're not. But I think it's worthwhile to ask everyone about all the resources that are available. Now, it's also state dependent. So our state in Massachusetts gives us 12 weeks of leave based on Massachusetts law. And I think the same is for New York, but I don't know all of the states that have a state policy. A lot of them just have FMLA. And that's another piece of information that you should look into, because the state leave in both, I don't know about New York, but in Massachusetts, the state leave is paid, but FMLA is unpaid. So you may want to look into these policies in your state and at your institution and figure out what's paid and what is unpaid, because that might also change how much leave you want to take. Because if you can take 12 weeks of unpaid leave, or if you can't take that long without getting paid, that will obviously affect your decision. So not just how much leave you get, but you also want to look into whether it's paid or unpaid. I know I'm throwing a lot of information out there, and that's because none of this is standardized, unfortunately. It's all really institution and even program dependent. I don't even know if all of the programs in my hospital have the same leave. I mean, I know our institution does, but in terms of the culture, I don't even know if all the programs in our hospital have the same leave culture. So it's a little bit hard to give specific advice for everyone, who's watching this video. But I really think that looking into those things can only help you. And it does take a little bit of work on your end. I mean, it's kind of annoying to have to go through all of these websites and read these various, I don't know, documents, but it will help you and it will pay off if you just do it. So we talked about, what did we talk about so far? We've talked about all of the potential resources, whether it's paid or unpaid. The other thing that you should look into is whether or not you have to also utilize your vacation. So there are some programs where you'll still get 4 weeks of vacation on top of 12 weeks of leave, and then there are some programs that will not. So you should definitely look into that, or however many weeks of vacation that you get. You should definitely look into that. If you're looking for ways to extend your leave, vacation is an easy way to kind of lump it in, but you just have to know that you're not going to have vacation after that. So is that something that you really want to do? Aside from that, if you really need more leave, then maybe even looping in some research time and figuring out ways that you can work from home during that time. I know it's really hard as a resident. I have not gone through that myself, but if that's something that you really need, then I would definitely bring it up to your program director and look for ways to be creative about how you can kind of change your schedule around in a way that will work for everyone and show that you want to participate, but you also need this time at home. Keep in mind that you can pretty much take as much time as you want, but they might make you extend your training. So all of this is really about not extending your training. But if you're willing to extend your training, I have a feeling that you'll be able to take more leave and do it at your own pace. I just know that a lot of people don't want to do that because it does throw off things like the academic schedule, the fellowship schedule, etc. So if you're willing to extend your leave, or if that's something that you really need to do, there should be a policy in place at your program to help you do that. But just know your resources and definitely advocate for yourself if you do need more time. In terms of how much leave to take, I haven't taken my leave yet, but from what I've heard, I know that like 2 weeks is way, way, way too short. I know programs that force you to do that, and I think that's really wrong. If that's your situation, see if you can loop in your vacation or research time. I would say that you should take as much time as you can get. So if you get a full 12 weeks, I would take every single day of that. But it's really up to you. I'll be taking about 6 or 7 weeks, knock on wood. I don't have anything here, but that's about how much time I'll have. But that's just because I start my fellowship. So for me, it's just based on timing, really, not my program. If you are in this transitional time like I am, which is between residency and fellowship, you can also try to find ways to move your fellowship by a couple of months so you can start later. People do that, especially if you're non-ACGME. I don't know if it makes it more difficult if you're ACGME, but if you are non-ACGME, that's an option. It's an option either way. At least something to bring up. And I did bring it up to my coordinator, but I decided against it so far. So that's another way to kind of get a little bit more time. It's really all about being creative at the end of the day. If your policy is not kind of satisfactory to you, you have to be creative, you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to find ways to make things work for yourself, for your family, and then also for your career, for your program. So if you do need help being more creative, I can try to help you on kind of a case-by-case basis, but it's so variable from program to program, and that makes things a little bit challenging. You should also know that the ABMS, the American Board of Medical Specialties, I believe, which is the governing body for all of these certification boards, came out with their own policy, which I will link below, which talks about how residents and fellows should get a minimum of 6 weeks for family and medical leave, and I believe up to 12 weeks, but I have to double check that, and maybe you should read the document in a lot more detail. Without having to extend training. So it's in that. Now, again, programs don't have to abide by that. It's a guideline. It's not, it's not like a law, but it's all there in writing. And so if you do need ways to back up what you want to your program director, these are all things that you should have handy and have read through if you do want to advocate for yourself in that way. Just make sure you go in there educated, that's all. And that policy applies to all programs that are that are 2 years or more. So if you are at a 1-year program, it won't apply to you, unfortunately. Another thing to keep in mind about leave policies is that, for example, FMLA only comes into play once you've been somewhere for 12 months. So if you are planning to, or if you're having a baby, or you're, whatever leave that you need to take is before you hit that 1-year mark, you should definitely talk to your coordinator and your program director and figure out ways that you can utilize your leave before maybe the FMLA would come into play. So these are just things to keep in mind and things to know, because it'll sneak up on you otherwise, and you don't want to be in a position where you can't take the leave that you want. I totally forgot to answer a question that was asked during the Q&A, but that was, how do you know when's the best time? There is no good time. I know that's like what everyone says, but I know it, and I know it's maybe not helpful. I can only tell you what I did. I got married during my second year. So during my second year of radiology. So I was a PGY3 already at the very beginning, right? First year, second year, yeah. The very beginning of third year or second year of radiology, so PGY3. And I sort of knew that I wanted to have a baby, but I was also too afraid to try before my boards because the core exam is really hard. So I did use the core exam as kind of my benchmark of like when we should maybe start thinking about it. We had some conversations about it, but I also know that it takes forever for some people to get pregnant. So I didn't know which camp I was going to fall in, if it was going to be fast or if it was going to be slow, or if I was going to have trouble. And so I sort of was like, okay, we will cross that bridge when we get there after my boards are done. And so for me, that was my benchmark. You don't need to have a benchmark. There is never going to be a good time for anyone to have a baby or have, any of this happen during residency, because residency is just inherently a really busy time. You're on call, you're working all the time. It's already hard. So I will just tell you that, I can just tell you what I did. And I did use my boards as a benchmark for when I wanted to start thinking about it. But again, that's not going to work for everyone. And for some people, even if you try to do that and you start trying maybe a few months before that with the assumption that you're not going to get pregnant right away, you never know what's going to happen. You might end up getting pregnant right away. Many people have had babies right before boards and it works out. It's fine. It's tough. It's going to be harder than if you didn't have a baby when you're studying for boards. I mean, just based on how babies are. But I think that you can make it work no matter what your situation is. So I would say make sure that you're ready and you kind of have committed to it in your mind, but don't worry about the residency part of it because that part will figure itself out. And you should go based on your life schedule and not your residency schedule for when to have a baby. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but those are my 2 cents on the topic. Another really common question that I've been getting is how do you approach this question of what is your family leave policy during your interviews? And I know a lot of people who watch my videos have already matched or are about to match next week. But if you haven't yet and you're watching this video, I think that the best thing to do, there's kind of 2 ways to do it. You can either be totally transparent and ask, which I think is a great way to go, because if you are going to a program that looks down upon that question, I think that's a red flag and you probably don't want to go there if this is something you're specifically interested in. The other option is to ask the residents during the Q&A portion where there's no faculty if you would rather keep it private. You can ask about residents that have had children during residency and you can find out that way. You can ask about how family-friendly a program is, but just keep in mind that there's a lot of hand-waving and you never really know what something means. But I think asking the residents and asking about specific residents that have had children, like has someone done this and what type of support did they get? Those are good questions to ask because that really gives you insight into the true culture of the medical leave. And honestly, programs that are supportive will be really open about that. And programs that are not will probably give you more of a hedgy response. So it's another way to kind of assess that situation. Some places will have it on their website, others won't. I don't really know other ways to figure it out aside from just asking. Of course, you can ask neighboring institutions, do you know about their policy? Those are not really things that we talk about as residents, so I really wouldn't even know for other Boston programs. I do know that Mass General and Brigham have really amazing family leave policies, but that's just because I know that they are really good. I don't really know, if you were to ask me about Tufts or Leahy or anyone else, I wouldn't know. So I think the best approach would be to ask any of the faculty members, ask the residents if you don't want to ask the faculty directly, and you can phrase it has anyone had a child or had, some sort of need for family leave, and what was the support that they received, and how do the co-residents feel, and things like that, because that is a good way to figure out how supportive a place is. And in terms of just general advice for approaching this with your program, I really am under the impression that you should tell your program directors or at least your chiefs early, because it's honestly in your best interest to get the schedule that you want during your pregnancy and after. So if you're able to kind of if you're okay with telling them early on in your pregnancy, it just makes scheduling easier. For example, if you don't want to be on IR or fluoro and you don't tell anyone, then it'll be more challenging the closer and closer you get to actually switch those rotations out. Things are just so much easier when we have more time to plan. Even your maternity leave or family paternity leave, whatever leave that you need, is just so much easier to plan, and you can swap out your call and to really decompress yourself during those months that you may not be in any condition to really be on your feet all day and things like that. Like, we at my program, at least, we really want to help you. And I think a lot of chiefs are like that. Like, we all want to work together, especially in radiology. We have a really great community. And so the more time you give us to plan this out, the better it is, in the sense that I can really tailor the call schedule and things like that to make sure that you're not in it when you really should not be working those shifts. So I'm that person who would tell early just for that reason, to make things easier for everyone, but not everyone is like that. So especially now, it's March. I know a lot of schedules are getting made for the next year, so if you already know that you're pregnant or whatever, the sooner you tell your chiefs or your program director, really the better it is for you, because you will be able to at least have a little bit more control of your schedule. I know it's not possible for everyone, and I also know that not everyone wants to do that. So again, this is just my advice from my experience, but it's totally up to you, obviously, how you approach it, and you can also see how other residents have done it in the past. I would also advise you to talk to any female residents who have recently had a baby, or even female faculty members, and even your male faculty members or male co-residents who have kind of gone through something or are very supportive, because you never know what kind of advice they'll give you and who will give you really outstanding advice, especially if you're at a really family-friendly program. I know I am, and I get unsolicited even parenting advice from all of my faculty members, and it's actually pretty nice. It's fun just to make conversation about it, but it's good. You never know who's going to come in with some really good advice or good resources. You just don't know who's going to help you the most, and I think being open about it can be really helpful, and just they'll tell you a lot about their own experience and what they did and what they should have done and what they wish they did. You never know what will be helpful. So I just talking about stuff with a lot of my, and not really so much my co-residents, but a lot of my faculty members, because they do offer a lot of insight into things that I really wouldn't have otherwise thought about. So even for example, I'll bring it up here. I'm really stressed out about the idea of pumping at work next year, but by the way, if you need to do that, you should totally talk to anyone in your program that has had to deal with that, and figure out the best ways to do it, because I'm really glad that I have already kind of sort of figured it out, because it's a big stress off my plate. But yeah, I talked to my female faculty members, and I was like, have you been in this situation, and what do you do, and what's the best way to approach it? And they have all been so helpful. One of our faculty members even told me which pumps she tried and which ones worked and which ones were good for this and which ones were better for that, and it's just, they're a whole network of resources right there for you to use. And so just depending on how close you are with your faculty, obviously, I think that they are really an essential resource, and you should ask them whatever questions that you have, whatever's stressing you out, because the whole pregnancy thing is always very stressful, and it's just nice to be able to kind of talk about it and know that someone else has been through what you've been through, and they know. All of your female faculty members have been in your shoes. They've been residents. They know the pressures of being a resident. They know call. They have been in that situation where they're pregnant and they have to do a fluoro study, for example. And so asking them what they did, and now seeing their, children be very healthy and normal and everything, it's reassuring, and it can be a good support system. So definitely talk to your faculty, talk to your co-residents about what they did, talk to your program directors, because they're just a wealth of information that you otherwise will just totally miss out on if you don't even, talk to them. My last piece of advice is definitely just advocate for yourself, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and, what you need. The reason I say this is because it can be really isolating, and people can make you feel really small and unimportant when you ask for something and they just say no, we don't, this is not how people have done it in the past, and that's just not how it's gonna happen for you. If you want something and you really need something, it's up to you to make it happen for yourself, which is unfortunate, But I think that it's really like it can only help you, and it'll help people, that come after you too, if you're able to advocate for the leave that you want. So come prepared with all of the tools. So know your state policy, know your HR policy, know the ABMS policy, and know that, like, and even find out the policies of the different programs in your hospital, in your institution, and figure out like where the discrepancies are and why it is that your program director or whoever who makes these decisions is not supportive of taking a full maternity leave or family leave. If it's because of call requirements, figure out a way with your chiefs to make it work. You can always offer to work before or after. Most people that take maternity leave are not trying to get out of work. I think I've mentioned this in a previous video too. I think all of us have just ended up working extra before and after. It's not like we're working less, it's just more before and after. And so showing that, the number of weeks is the same and we're going to work it out this way, figure out what the tension points are for your program director and see if you can be creative and resolve those. If you have to give a conference or you have to do certain things during that time, see how you can make it work for yourself. There's definitely going to be give and take in all situations, but I do think you should advocate for yourself and make sure that you know what your resources are. And again, I'll link all of the ones that I can find in the description box. But you should definitely do that homework on your end too. And each institution will have their own policies. And again, if you ever feel isolated, there's a whole online community of really awesome women, I will say, like moms, dads even, online. So you don't have to feel isolated. You don't have to feel like you're the only one. And I know in radiology, it can feel that way if you are in a program with like very few women. It can definitely feel that way, but just know that there are lots of others out there and you're not the only one. And that whatever changes you make to this policy will definitely help the people that come after you. And honestly, I think that dads would like this too. If, paternity leave, they probably want extra paternity leave too. So if you make it into a family leave policy, you can probably get buy-in on all sides. But anyways, those are really my pieces of advice about all of this. You do have to do your homework, I guess, is the main takeaway. And each institution is different, but you should strive for 12 weeks. You should strive to get all of that time. And really, in a perfect world, it should not include your vacation time. In a perfect world, you'd be paid for it too, but you have to take what you can get at the end of the day. And I think that's everything that I wanted to say. If you do have any more questions, you can reach out to me and I will try to get back to you. And yeah, I'm at Yesha Gupta MD, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.